Welcome to the Video Insiders podcast. I'm Carlos Pacheco.
And I'm Tom Martin.
And we are two self-isolating video experts on YouTube's platform. We've been managing YouTube channels for many, many years, getting close to 10 years for me, myself. Wow. How about you, Tom?
About eight, I'd say.
Yeah. I'm exaggerating. I think we're almost exactly the same in terms of like the amount of years we've been working on this. So yeah, we've been managing many, many YouTube channels in generating billions of views and tens of millions of subscribers. What's going on, Tom?
Yeah, well, it's I don't know what week we're at, like week 7 of lockdown. I think I heard today.
I'm at week 8 for me.
Yeah, it's kind of normal, but it's also, I feel like I'm hanging on by a thread. I'm super busy, super stressed. Kids are, causing me great anxiety in every way, shape and form. Looking forward to hopefully getting some kind of announcement this week that the restrictions are going to be lightened and there's some kind of light at the end of the tunnel. But just keeping on, lots of client work to do, working on lots of kind of longer term projects that are not necessarily generating revenue now, but planting some seeds for the future, shall we say. So all positive, keeping busy, maybe a bit too busy, looking to get more and more help with what I'm doing. So but generally, I'd say I'm very lucky that I'm still working and paying the bills, and a lot of people in a lot less fortunate positions than me. So
yeah, that's how I sort of like see it myself as well. As I'm busy, can't say it's the most efficient work these days, but definitely thankful that it doesn't look like there's going to be a lack for work for us in this side of things. Which is great. Like I said, hopefully we can help anybody who's, it's kind of interesting. I've actually had to hire people. And you're looking to hire people. So it's actually, we're doing good, right?
Yeah, it's strange, but it also makes sense. And we'll talk a bit more today about why it makes sense in terms of viewership being up and stuff across YouTube and other digital platforms. But of course, before we dive into today's topic, we've got a big thank you today to say, haven't we, Carlos?
Yes, we do. We wanted to extend a big thank you to TubeBuddy. TubeBuddy is the ultimate tool for creators to streamline their daily workflow on YouTube, allowing for more time to create great content, for brands to help reduce busy work and focus on what matters, which is growing your YouTube business, for agencies to help manage multiple clients, and for networks, which gives partners the tools for success and an attractive incentive for recruitment. Tom, we have a special offer for our listeners, right?
We do indeed. We have a world exclusive multi-channel discount, and you can get that only by visiting videoinsiders.fm/TubeBuddy. Thank you, TubeBuddy.
Thank you, TubeBuddy. So, Tom, we're sort of like doing a little, update from us, not an interview show. We've done a lot of them. We actually have much more still in the bank for the next couple of weeks, but we wanted to do a quick update and just talk in general about how are things.
Yeah, I think we really wanted to touch on your newfound fame, Carlos.
Oh yeah, tons of fame there.
You're a cited authority in an article that we're going to discuss today. An amazing article written by a good friend of the show, Chris Stokel Walker, who is a journalist, specialist in the field of YouTube. He's written for various publications, including Wired magazine, and also author of the book YouTubers and How YouTube Shook Up TV and Created a New Generation of Stars. I'll be totally honest, I haven't read it yet, Chris. That's probably the only reason we haven't had you on the show yet, because I barely have time to wash my face in the morning, let alone to read books. But I think it's absolutely a given that we'll get Chris to come onto the show pretty soon.
Let's be honest here. It's not like we're going to learn much from his book. you know?
Well, from what I can tell, it's more of a kind of a narrative rather than a how-to. So I'm sure there's some great insights that I've probably overlooked.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad book at all. I'm just saying, like, for us, it's like, oh, okay, it's the space we've been living in for the past 8 years. So, I don't know about you, but when I'm in the space, I have a harder time sort of like reading a book about it. But that's me.
Yeah. It's like I don't know if you have the term in Canada, a busman's holiday.
No,
like
what is
someone like a professional driver who has to drive to go on holiday? It's like
yeah.
I feel like exactly when I've finally got time to read a book, I want to be on the beach or by a swimming pool somewhere reading like Ready Player One or something like that. Just a bit of escapism.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that sort of like reflects what Matt Gielan was sort of saying a couple episodes back when I asked him, like, what YouTube channels he's into these days. And he was like, I'm not into a lot these days because he sort of wants to take a break from it when he's not thinking about it. So yeah, we're sort of in that same space sometimes.
Yeah, so in the last few weeks, we've had interviews with Brenda Bisner from Kidoodle, and we spoke together about how a lot of YouTube, especially YouTubers in the kids space, are flocking to her platform and other platforms like hers because of the falling CPMs on YouTube. And that was even before coronavirus came along and hurt that even more. And then last week we spoke to Denis Crushell of Tubular Labs, and he spoke about all of the kind of viewing trends pre and during Corona. So I think we just wanted to do a bit more of an update and talk about this article that you were featured heavily in, Carlos. And I suppose I've got a few questions for you. Like, Did the article come from the data that you were looking into already? Did you kind of pitch this article, or was it something that was already happening and you were already looking at that data? Because there's a big bit of research that you did, and I was fortunate enough that you shared that with me before this article came to existence. So kind of bring the listeners up to date about how this actually came to be.
All right. So first off, the article is called "As YouTube Traffic Soars, YouTubers Say Pay is Plummeting" on a publication called 10 on Medium. So yeah, I mean, the reason that came to be is I was obviously interested in taking a look at how CPMs were behaving, and I had sort of done a preliminary check and had noticed a drop. And then Chris sort of said, like, I'd be interested in, he sort of poked back and he said I'd be interested in sort of like a deeper analysis of that. And so I took it on myself to go across the various networks I have access to, the various channels I have access to, and just pull the data in terms of what's happening CPM wise. And I was sort of I had a little bit of a reservation towards it because CPMs are so different across verticals, right? From music to comedy to entertainment to DIY, all that sort of stuff, and to children's content, right? Obviously, children's content has an effect. When you're dealing with so many channels, children's content is actually a big, sort of a big chunk of that. I essentially pulled the data, CPM data over the last year to take a look at, how it's behaving. And, as expected, things dropped pretty, the word I used was exponentially, but I got called out for that because it's one of those words that I tend to use a lot, like literally. But that's my limited English vocabulary. So yeah, like it just saw that CPMs started dropping pretty drastically once around mid-March, and just confirmed that the views are going way up for everybody in general, and that CPMs are dropping. So you're getting a lot more views and a lot less money per views. So that's how that came to be.
Yeah, and so can we just kind of break down the numbers a little bit and talk about what you saw and what I think Chris then managed to go and get kind of validated by other creators and other people like you that have access to a lot of data.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's like the way I sort of like put it all together was essentially extrapolated the CPMs and the views. So on average, When I look at, for the past year, across all the channels stuff, we're talking about like 150 million views per week. So, 500, 600 million views a month across almost 180 channels. So what we saw is that essentially there's pretty obviously there's a drop January 1st as usual, and things picked up pretty quickly, which I think we spoke about a little bit, in episodes early this year, where it felt like CPMs were back up pretty fast compared to other years, which was, giving us hope for the year, feeling like the platform was finally, sort of becoming like a little bit more mature and getting, more and more money for the views. But as of, let's just say, March 15th, things just took a dive. So, for example, the aggregated CPM around March 15th was 422 USD. By March 29th, it had dropped to 372. And then when you look at the high in last week of January, first week of February, we were in around 550 in terms of CPM. So
yeah, and January kind of seasonally is usually the lowest month of the year for CPMs as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to compare, compared to December, you're looking at like 640. So yeah, it's 50%. It's a 50% drop, which, January 1st, you saw like I would say a 30. I'm sort of like winging the percentages here, but you saw something like 30% drop, which is normal. But then things picked up pretty quickly, as I said before. And then, but again, like essentially things have dropped since then. Admittedly, these numbers are already 4 to 6 weeks old by the time you hear this episode. And I'll sort of like add to that actually it turns out that April 1st was the low point for everybody. It's really interesting to see how like April 1st has this sort of like a little bit of a dive, and again,
this makes sense. Again, seasonally, it's the start of a new quarter, when again you see kind of budgets dipping. But it might be that instead of just taking a dip, budgets were actually pulled for that quarter.
Yeah, essentially, I would just this morning before we went on the call, I was like, let me just check out how things are going, and just to add to the article, because obviously the article is a couple weeks old now. Things have stabilized since then and actually are a little bit on an uptick. Very slow, gradual, which I think is hopeful. One thing I'll be interesting to see, and I want to sort of like continue this trend of analyzing the CPMs across many, many channels, is to see how ad fill is changing. One of the data points that I didn't check is like, what's the fill rate? Which is obviously has dropped because views going up, CPMs going down. So there's probably a huge drop in fill rates. And just for those who don't understand what a fill rate is, that's the amount of views you get that are monetized versus the ones that aren't monetized. So that's something that I hope to do in the next little while. But I'm one of those people who always has hopes to create content, but never creates content. I always have these ideas for a blog post and never do it. But yeah, I'm sort of hopefully I can do that in the next little while.
And I think that kind of makes sense what you're saying, that it could be picking up a bit, because I think generally, and this again might be in my little bubble, but I think there is a kind of growing confidence in the business world at the moment that, I think the original panic settings, like, right, pull the budgets. We need to know exactly what every single penny that's been spent, we need to account for it. And then maybe people realize, okay, things are not as bad as we first thought. So, we can start running those ads again. Or it's like, oh, we've turned off our ads and all of our sales have stopped. So we need to reignite that. So let's put some budget back into paid ads. I've got a friend who is a small boutique ad agency, and shout out to Sarah, Platypus Media. She's the best in the business. She said that she's got clients that are having their best results ever in running YouTube ads and stuff. And people have still got a hunger to spend, and to buy. And if people know what they're doing, then those ads can still be super fruitful and cost effective because there's less competition in the auction now.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of like insights that you can bring into this ecosystem. Like, there's, you got to think of like, there's budgets that need to be spent. There's industries that are completely decimated. Travel, restaurant industry is suffering right now, obviously. But at the same time, there are tons of other industries that are sort of like, growing, and, the consumer packaged goods, the CPG industries are doing extremely well right now. And their advertising does not stop. They don't need to stop. And they're probably shifting things to be more digital. I don't know if I would mention this here, but it's like, if I was buying out of home right now, billboards, I would shift that money somewhere else. Yeah. As everybody, one of the things that I feel sort of like a little bit all over the place here, but like one of the things that, what this recession is forcing is a lot of companies to accept or sort of like shift to digital a lot faster. There are a lot of companies, even clients I work with, where you keep telling them, hey, there's an opportunity on digital. There's an opportunity to innovate on digital. And they don't do it because, A, the money's not as lucrative, because they're used to, they do live events, conferences, all that sort of stuff. And then now that side's been completely erased. So they're obviously forced to go on digital, and they're innovating. They're doing new things. They're figuring things out. And what do you do to promote digital content? Digital advertising, right? So again, there's that sort of little ray of sunshine that I see in this side of things. Is there's going to be way more companies on digital platforms, and going to be way more companies wanting to advertise on these platforms. So we're at the bottom of it, but it already feels like things are sort of like looking up in this side of the business.
Yeah, and as the article says, that it's not just digital advertising that has suffered. I think it actually said that traditional media advertising is actually probably worse a hit. But that the tides may turn on that. But I also think that people are turning to YouTube because, and again, this is probably anecdotally and something we spoke about before we started recording, is that we both seem to be starting to get a lot more leads at the moment. And I think what it is that YouTube's probably been on a lot of people's to-do lists for a long time, and a lot of people are at home or finally, having less meetings, less travel, and they've got time to sit, take stock. I know that's exactly what happened to me in my business. Is I had time to kind of decide where my priorities were going to be. And for a lot of companies and personal brands and stuff like that, I think YouTube is that priority that they've been putting off. And so now it's like, okay, I've got some time. I need some more leads. I need some more coverage. I need some more eyeballs. YouTube seems to be right for that. And so a lot of people are turning to YouTube, maybe for the first time as well. Have you seen much of that, from either, client work or the kind of, I know you work with a lot of media companies too.
What I've seen is not necessarily, I've seen YouTube sort of like stay consistent. I've seen clients do live stream a lot more. I almost feel like we need to have an episode on live streaming because it's such a different type of behavior. I had a client, sort of loop me in on an internal discussion about it. And I was like, I don't want to get too deep into it now, but it's like, live streaming is much more like appointment television. So it just needs to be planned differently. But what I'm also seeing is like everybody going on every single social platform, right? Like, live streaming on Facebook, live streaming on Instagram, uptick on podcasting as well, right? I remember reading the first couple of weeks, podcasting was actually down. Not podcast episodes, but podcast listening, because people weren't commuting as much, right? But things have sort of like picked up since then. So yeah, like it's sort of like a weird situation right now where everybody sort of keep creating content. They haven't stopped. Like one of the things I found fascinating about this space is that everybody's just plugging along and figuring out new ways to put their content out there. And the content hasn't slowed down at all, which I think is a good thing for the industry, as there's an increased amount of eyeballs on these platforms, right? Like everybody's forced to go online because there's no other ways to communicate. I mean, it's not like anybody's going to call somebody. I'm joking because there actually is increased people calling each other, but it's just, like everybody's talking about how this pandemic, it's rough, but like, let's be honest here. Compared to people who have gone through war and stuff, like we've got it pretty easy. And also the fact that, we have the internet, and that saves us from going crazy or else we'd be stuck, reading books or something. I want to sort of add a little anecdote here. Is one thing that I'm finding interesting is that formats that were working before, or formats that were sort of okay before, don't seem to be resonating as much. What I find interesting is that content that is educational and is helping people is consistently going, like just does not stop and just keeps growing, and there's renewed interest. I had a client who the timing was perfect. They didn't even plan for it. They made a video about how to set up their Zoom account for online teaching. Obviously that blew up for him, but at the same time, I have clients who just make content to entertain and are less educational, and their views are sort of flat and sort of like meh. Yes, they distract a bit, but they don't seem to be doing anything more than they usually do. So I sort of see that a little bit of as an indicator of what's really working on YouTube. As for the other platforms, that's a different dynamic. They're much more, in the moment, distract me platform. So obviously making content that's more about entertainment or more about like, interrupting and just, in your face type of stuff, I think really works well on those platforms.
Yeah, I think as well, because there's so much competition now, and especially now if parents are starting to take the reins and saying, okay, well, yes, you can watch YouTube, but it has to have some kind of educational value. Or if you're stuck at home and instead of watching YouTube for like fun, you're like, okay, I'm going to learn a skill. I'm going to learn how to use Photoshop, or I'm going to learn how to play the guitar. And you're going to try and, actually use your time a bit more constructively than just, okay, this is my lunch break and I'm going to watch YouTube for an hour to kind of just escape.
Yeah.
So that makes perfect sense. I think now is a great time for people to grow their audiences with consumption up. The article mentions some data that the New York Post gathered that said that views were around 15% up. That kind of correlates to what I've seen. I wonder if that correlates to what you've seen.
Yeah, I've actually not looked at the views too much because obviously they're going up. I'm not saying they're not, but it's just I haven't actually looked at the number of traffic from my perspective. I focus very much on the CPM stuff, the actual money. But yeah, like again, across the board, when I look at the graphs, it's going up. It's not going down. As I'm looking at other platforms, specifically in the last couple of weeks, I've jumped into the world of Amazon Prime Direct. I'm seeing clients, triple their views on Amazon Prime Direct, wow. Which is really interesting to see. It's way, one of the things that's amazing about YouTube is that, you realize just how deep the analytics are in YouTube. And then we start working with like traditional, Amazon's not traditional, but just other platforms, other video platforms that are much more tied to the TV ecosystem. You just see how limited the analytics are and so slow when you're used to sort of like that fast.
I don't think it's just the analytics that are way behind YouTube, just like the upload process. I've been publishing some stuff to Amazon this week myself. It is very, very painful. And you just realize how amazing the tech that YouTube have put together is, especially when you're talking about uploading and publishing content at scale. It's pretty crazy. Kind of one last question that I've got for you is, for all of the adpocalypses and whatever you want to call it, the kind of, whenever advertising has taken a big hit, whether it's the kind of adpocalypse or, the kids apocalypse or the apocalypse, CPMs have always recovered or have built back up from the lowest peak. But it always seems to be kind of the law of diminishing returns, and they'll kind of settle back up, but not to the level that they once were. And I think, if you look at the yearly trends of, I don't know, maybe the last 5 years or so, I think CPMs have probably gone down every single year. how do you see the recovery from this one? Do you think it will get back to 2019 levels? Do you think it will get back to early 2020 levels, or settle somewhere a little bit lower?
I think it's going to be extremely hard to predict. But one of the things that anybody who's worked in advertising for the past many years is that CPMs don't necessarily go up, specifically in aggregating, big aggregating networks. They're consistently try to find ways to sort of like make CPMs drop. Think of somebody who was living off AdSense on their website, many years ago, probably is not seeing the same CPMs as they are in the last couple of years. Again, you got to think of it this way. There's like YouTube's cleaning up its act, right? So a lot of crappy content is being demonetized. A lot of duplicate channels are being demonetized. So they're cleaning. So what that means is that the money is going to go towards quality channels. So I think the quality channels are going to be fine. They're going to, the CPMs are going to go up. I think anybody who's sort of like in this space just to throw, anything out there and just, get the views and not really think about the audience will suffer. And the CPMs are never going to be that great. At the same time, we're hearing that the coronavirus, the pandemic at this point has, I'll use the word exponentially, increased the likelihood of newspapers officially dying. And where's that money going to go? Even, most of it's already on digital, but other types of advertising are probably going to be affected. Again, think of out of home is not a space where I would be spending money these days. So as people stay more and more indoors and use more of the internet, people are going to spend more money on the internet. And then again, like there's the way these platforms are making money is different from advertising nowadays. I've had a couple creator channels start making decent money off of stars on Facebook. Which is their new sort of like monetization ecosystem, right? And that's, much more of a support system situation, a Patreon type of situation. And is that going to be the new economy for creators? Is to, get your attention, get people to give you like pennies for every view. As usual, it's going to be a diversification situation. I think it's exponentially increasing the opportunity of diversifying the money in these platforms. This is a weird one. I actually dreamt about YouTube ad formats last night.
Sounds like a nightmare to me, Carlos.
I was like, did I seriously dream about YouTube ad formats? I was like, yep. And I was like, I need to disconnect a bit. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think I you know what? I don't want to predict it. At the end of the day, it's one of those things where there's just so much to take into consideration. My only, hope or, the bright light I see here is that anybody that's creating good content, valuable content that's reaching a valuable audience is going to do very well in the next little while. I've seen channels that, upload very high quality content, get really good CPMs. And I think those are the ones that are going to win in the long run.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I think also companies that don't just rely on the quality of their content, let's say they're a big rights holder, a lot of, let's say if you've got the rights to, let's say you're Disney, you could start a channel and get 10 million views in no time. But is that because of your strategy or is that in spite of your strategy? And I think the people with great content that also know how to leverage the platform and optimize for that platform are also going to be the winners versus just those that have got great content kind of by luck rather than judgment, or they've inherited that and they're just kind of mindlessly just broadcasting that content, So I think that will also really start to increase in importance as, competition for eyeballs, just increases and increases and increases.
Yeah, that's definitely feels where the industry is going. It's going to be a lot more competition out there as TV networks, anybody that's in the media industry, right? Anybody that publishes, they're putting stuff on YouTube way faster, and a lot more quality out there, a lot more stuff. And the established platforms are gonna win again. They're gonna jump into this platform and just the one thing I do have to admit that I don't feel very hopeful for is the independent creator. Like the YouTuber, they're going to do okay, but the heyday of a YouTuber going from zero to Mr. Beast, more rarer and rarer as the big platforms take the majority of the eyeballs away.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to it's going to be the education on all channels that are the million subscriber. I teach people how to play guitar, or I teach people how to do Adobe Premiere, or I teach people how to mend their clothes when they're broken. I think those are going to be the kind of the ones that succeed longer term, because they're going to get better targeted ads, that kind of thing.
Well, and then they're not going to care too much about the CPMs at the end of the day, right? They're going to be like, again, anybody that creates educational content will end up getting business about what they're good at. Right?
Yeah.
If you make videos about, being good at knitting, then people who want things to be knitted are going to be approaching you. So
or people that sell knitting equipment and stuff like
that as well, right? So there's a benefit from being an educational in this space. And I always love to use my piano teacher client, which is such an awesome niche. He sees opportunities from brands coming to him in the industry he recruits students. So his business isn't YouTube. His business is his, educational platform. And it's just a different ecosystem. And, you just have to understand that, the entertainers of this world are going to have just a harder time on this platform than the educators.
Yeah. All the entertainers can go on TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing though. Like those platforms thrive on the people who want to just entertain and not think long term and build a real business, because those platforms come and go very quickly. I loved how Denis put YouTube in a different vertical than the social platforms. It's much more of a long term platform. It's not, the audience just is steady and it just keeps growing. So TikTok, no matter what, no matter how great it is, it feels like it's an app away from being dethroned type of situation, right? I might be eating my words in a year, but at this point, that's how I feel about those platforms.
Yeah, we'll see if YouTube Stories can top it. So cynical, so snarky. Well, Carlos, I think that's a great way to wrap up this conversation. And who knows, maybe in a month or two, we'll be doing another update on the Corona clips, and seeing. Hopefully, by that point, we'll be looking back on how it's recovered. But who knows? Before we go, we'd like to say a huge thank you to our headline sponsor, TubeBuddy.
TubeBuddy, thank you so much for sponsoring the show. We use and recommend TubeBuddy to all our clients, as it has the most powerful tools out there to help your content to be discovered, be it the keyword suggestion tool, the copy pasting tools for thumbnails and end cards and info cards. Those, power features are, make my day every day. So thank you, TubeBuddy, for supporting the show.
And remember, you can get an exclusive Video Insiders FM multi-channel discount by visiting videoinsiders.fm/TubeBuddy.
Don't forget, if you're enjoying our show, please give us a 5-star review on the old Apple Podcast and share it with a friend who will enjoy, somebody who's in the industry and is interested into our subject matter.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe. Stay sane.
Yeah.
Bye.